something in you called your sensory system has already calculated the situation at hand. And the more you develop the sensory system, which is everything we're doing in here, the more you develop your sensory system, the more you're prepared. And the more you develop your sensory system, the more you have levels of preparation for things that are going, happen in a life, and a life well lived. Hopefully you're taking enough planes and trains and automobiles that some things happen because you're on, that's what that means, you're living. So hopefully, you're living enough for some things to happen. And so when things happen, you are prepared. And you not only have one line of defense, but you have depth of levels of training that are going to allow you to sensorially, you're going to have that kind of, experience of bending the curvature of time-space, which is it's not a superhuman ability, just FYI. It's just a human ability. What was that graphic tee that we came up with today, Julian? Human being? Yeah, that's what it was. Human being. We're coming up with, some graphic tees. We're human beings, which is, it's not superhuman, it's just human. We're just human, but we're human. We're double human beings. And when you have that, we're human squared beings. And Yogi Bhajan said human beings, the reason that it's called that is because you have to decide to be one. It's a choice. But when you do, in this time, what's happening, and we had very, very, very high octave of energy hit this planet yesterday. So when this is happening, part of the whole game is how much can you construct your sensory system in a way that will be very responsive, so sensitive that it's responding to things that are beyond your cognition. It's beyond your cognition. We get that? And then you start to really get these kind of spidey senses. So when we're talking about the sensory human, we're developing this kind of sensory power. And the sensory power allows you to kind of know, like Shripreet, she had something in her knew that she was gonna, and she didn't actually even realize it until the next day. The thing just popped on and started to, and that's kind of, a lot of us have had that experience in different kinds of pressurized situations, but you want to be able to have that as something that is a skill set and a tool for you anytime you need it, which is really development of the sensory system. And I taught a bunch of classes about the sensory system, and I'm going to continue because the development of the sensory system is happening at a very, very, very accelerated pace now. And so the planet is becoming more sensory than it ever has been, which means that all of the polarization of the sensory system is coming to very much a kind of head. And what is the polarization of the sensory system? Well, if you don't have command over the senses, then they have command over you. So just so you know, even if you weren't doing White Tantric Yoga with us up on the hill, you can tap into that space anytime you need it. And that's really the command of the sensory experience, is that you have a pathway, a neural pathway, a nervous system pathway, a spiritual pathway, a psychological pathway, an emotional pathway, a glandular pathway, all these kind of pathways to the power of this kind of etheric energy, which is why we do the White Tantric Yoga. So we're going to do a little bit of something that we did yesterday that doesn't have to be done you can't do the White Tantric Yoga not in White Tantric Yoga, but there was something that we did yesterday that I'd like to kind of take into our practice tonight that you can do on your own. So we'll do that. And then we're going to work with a little bit of this etheric power so that you can start to command the sensory system in a way that's going to make you very, very strong. And Yogi Bhajan, his message yesterday, and in this kind of experience of the polarization that's happening, it's very, very, very accented right now, isn't it? And if you don't have command of your sensory system, you can get wiped out on either side of it. on either side of the polarity, you can get kind of knocked off your balance, we'll call it. Okay, and that can look like a lot of things. So we're seeing, people who people who were strong people, powerful people, charismatic people, they don't want to live anymore. We're seeing there's all sorts of things that are happening that are a product of this polarization, this lack of command of the sensory experience, and what is being demanded of us, and you can see that demand in the ways that people are responding to it all over the planet. Either they're kind of crippled under the pressure of it, or they're actually being empowered. So that polarization is very, very, very profound right now. And so what we want to kind of do as yogis is we're working on expanding our power on either side of the spectrum of the poles. And that's a sensory power. Because that means that, a lot of times you get these kind of spiritual, people who have gotten more spiritual, and all of a sudden they've gotten much more bland. Have you noticed that? It's like the voice has gotten softer and everything's gotten more bland. Like that somehow means like I'm more spiritual. Or so we have kind of that model of one side of kind of the what it would mean. Or people get very sensitive. The whole conversation of like I'm an empath, so I just can't handle being in this situation or that situation. Or there's a lot of that talk. The yogic science that was developed for this time on the planet, and I've been talking a lot about this, the yogis developed these sciences for this time on the planet because they knew that the pressure of the end of the Kali Yuga was going to be so heavy on the human psyche and the human system and the human spirit that it would require a strength that only is cultivated by being human. And so that's what these techniques and these technologies were cultivated and practiced and perfected through these past 7,000 or more years. That's what it was right now. This is the time. So we're very lucky to be able to practice them and utilize them. And the whole game is, how can you expand yourself on both sides of the poles? And I was saying this to my friend Stacy, there's a sutra that Yogi Bhajan said, understand through compassion or you'll misunderstand the times. Understand through compassion or you'll misunderstand the times. Well, understanding through compassion doesn't mean that you only see things on one side. You have to have compassion for everyone in the situation. That takes a lot of strength because everybody wants to basically demonize each other because we get swept up in these polarizations. And when we get swept up in the polarizations of the news media and the polarizations of corporations that feed on you being crippled by only being able to see things through one perceptive lens called fear or outrage or whatever's being fed on that side of the pole. Now, as a yogi, you have to, it's not understand through compassion just for one part of that equation. You have to have compassion for every single part and person and agenda and aspect of the equation. That takes a lot of strength. It's a deep spiritual practice. Remember, this really quite profound teacher was talking about some things that were happening in the Middle East, some trespasses. This was a long time ago, but she was talking about some trespasses against human dignity and, some pretty horrible things that were happening. And her teaching was that you can't just have compassion for the person, the victim, but you actually have to have compassion also for the perpetrators, for the victimizers, for all of the kind of misunderstandings and misappropriations of power and kind of calculations of why we came here on the planet at this time. That's true compassion. Then you're in a whole new kind of perceptive reality. It's going to make you very deep and very strong. So I'd like to work a little bit with this as when we're here throughout this month. We're going into a very intense eclipse cycle, and there's a lot that can be deepened in you and grown in you, and you can become the kind of pillar of strength in your community, in your family, in your business that you really know you have to be now, and you have to be. Sorry. You just have to be. Okay? That's the plan? All right.